After this, the cutscene where Knuckles stands around doing nothing, and Amy says sadly that everything feels cold and dead, even though there's still grass living below her. Safe? The sassy Amy I know would have called him out on it. Why is she even still there? Okay, why the hell doesn't Sonic tell Tails to bring Amy Knuckles to the Lost Hex? He was risking their lives by telling them to stay there. What made him think people were immune and not everything else? I don't feel any tension because not many people are shown as being threatened. It's not like it's targeting a city. Amy sees greenery turn white, like it's generations again. The only way Sonic's able to tease the old man's Eddie is by awkwardly mentioning the word school around him, unenthusiastically. If the Deadly Six made it a lot more obvious they were based on Japanese versions of demons, that'd be a lot cooler than what we got. Eggman for some reason goes back to Sonic and Tails and tells him about the life-draining machine. It's interesting that Eggman uses Cubot's head to project a video, so he can conveniently show him footage, and I have to assume it's because Cubot already saw the machine in action, apparently. He complains the machine can't be shut off, and it supposedly is being used in ways it's not designed for, when the Zeddy are literally doing the same thing he was doing. At least Tails points out this, asking him what the machine was originally designed for then. If you know it doesn't make any sense, why are you writing this anyways? Anyways, Sonic just wants to smash the machine, logically. And Tails has no chemistry with Sonic at all here. And Sonic is thankfully annoyed with Tails. How is Sonic supposed to know that smashing the machine would cause a massive explosion? Well, that's convenient for the plot. Tails should be saying, maybe Eggman's lying that we need to work with him to stop the machine. Instead, he just magically came to the same conclusion that Eggman did, despite not knowing anything about how the machine is built. The idea of him using a machine that drains the life from grass is something Sadiam Robotnik would approve of. So that's cool. Tails is rude to Eggman. Consider how calm Eggman is being right now. He looks like the mature adult compared to Tails being an arrogant brat. Sure, he isn't asking nicely, but he has every reason to be annoyed with him. I like that Eggman says, "Man up, Tails," and that he doesn't like working with them, which he didn't even acknowledge in earlier games. Why are they all making such a big deal out of working with Eggman after all the different times they had to work together? It makes sense if he explained he's just tired of having to do that because it happened so much. Sega should have told Pontac and Graf that this happens all the time. The vast majority of the time a writer is hired to work for a franchise, they're not gonna be a fan of the franchise.
Overcompensate much?
Tails fixes Cubot to give him his awful Kermit the Frog voice again, and after smiling sweetly, he apologizes and says the voice chip was built by a 2-year-old. While he has every reason to hate Eggman, no 2-year-old can build anything. This is the cutscene where Tails throws a bitch fit. In Sonic Chronicles, he admires him for his engineering talent. Eggman doesn't deserve to have him admire him for his engineering talent. That doesn't mean I want to see a good person talk like this. He's being a petulant child. None of the earlier games had him call him Eggface. For a bunch of people who hate Eggman, for most of the franchise, it was pretty rare of them to call him immature insults. Normally Tails is one of my favorite characters, but here I'm just thinking, stop being a whiny little bitch and just deal with it. The narrative didn't give any reason for this sudden irritating side to him. It's also really lame when Sonic and Tails both say to Eggman at the same time that he bites. It feels immature. I get it, they're supposed to be kids, and I'd rather Sega acknowledge that than pretend that the characters are ageless. But if most of the franchise didn't have them act a certain way, then they shouldn't. Because it's going to be off-putting to everybody. At least Sonic gets to try to defend himself from Tails. When Eggman says bites again, that even makes fanboys of Pontac and Graf cringe. This game's writing style doesn't pull off drama well. Of course, Sega was the one that came up with the story. Pontac and Graf only wrote the dialogue. Usually Tails hates Eggman because of his evilness, not because he thinks he's a bad engineer for no reason. And he can't think that, he's just lying to him. It's already bad enough that the designs of the Zeti are ridiculously childish. The younger demographic thinks kiddie stuff is lame, that's why they're all off playing Call of Duty with their friends. The next cutscene has Zavok compliment Xena's appearance to manipulate her into fighting Sonic. I thought the Zeti were proud warriors. If she doesn't want to fight, then she shouldn't even be with them. What does her looking good have to do with her being capable of fighting Sonic? I think she knows that. And she just wants to reward him for the flattery. Why doesn't Zavok just threaten her? I'd say that because it'd be a lot simpler. He flatters her on multiple things, and the thing other than her beauty makes sense to get her to fight Sonic. So that shouldn't have been dropped in IDW. Because in IDW, he literally does just threaten her. I have to assume it's because the Zeti being beaten by Sonic caused him to lose respect for them. It would have been more interesting if she ended up not fighting Sonic because she doesn't like violence as much. She'd feel like an actual character then. In the next cutscene, they act like Tails' bitch fest never happened. If you're gonna have an argument between them, take advantage of it. Have Sonic try to make it up to him and have Tails feel sorry for what he did. Don't just make it feel even more out of place by having it be ignored later. I like a few things about this scene. Sonic, after beating Xena, makes a dynamic entrance and says that was cool. And then he talks lamely. It's good that Tails cringes at that pun. It's better than him and Sonic laughing at their brilliant joke. But instead Sonic is portrayed as a flawed character. It just happens in a way where Tails looks like he has no chemistry with him whatsoever. The only thing they agree on is bullying Eggman. Right after Sonic makes a pun, Zavok threatens Eggman. And Eggman actually has a really good line here. Zaz talks like a crazed gangster, but it never makes any sense, because it's not like he's with other gangsters who also talk like that. Eggman threatens him again, and punches the ice cubes, being an actual badass for once. I'm not sure why he said worlds and not just world though, since Zeti only have one planet. Also, it's lame to have the villain do a threat and not get to do anything. No one wants to see him carry out those threats, but he could have done something to the Zeti, like attack them a bit. Realistically, he holds his hand in pain after that. These lines are good for a villain at least. It's so surprising to see lines like this in a game with Zaman in it. The tone of this game is so schizophrenic. It just has dark elements there instead of playing off it. Xena shows just how one-dimensional she is to Sonic. I say that, but no other villain in the Sonic series cares about fingernail painting. I actually like Sonic's response here for once. And I like that after Xena believes him like an idealist, he reveals how sarcastic he was. But it's weird that she was naive in the first place. It makes the fact that she was extremely cynical, thinking idealistic people were disgusting in IDW even weirder. Why is she gullible if she thinks people being nice to each other is gross? Clearly she wants people to be nice to her. The Zeti are actually less obviously one-dimensional in Japanese. The emo one is just flamboyant and melodramatic, and there's changes in tone to match the comedy attempts. I've heard Colors was better in Japanese too. Orbot complains about having to lug Cubot's head around, and shows a sense of humor by laughing after putting his head on a snowman. Tails sarcastically says his robots reflect Eggman's genius, which only makes sense because it doesn't make any sense for Eggman to program them to be like that. But then says that this gives him an idea, speaking in a horribly raspy voice while saying that. Eggman says he could do something to get rid of the Zeti, using technology, and Sonic points out that this will exterminate every living thing around them. That's a good character moment for Eggman. Then as Cubot tries to attack Tails with a crab meat body, annoying circus music plays, and Eggman saves him, which isn't explained at all. It's good that Tails at least thanks him gratefully. Cubot sadly apologizes, saying that he suddenly felt mean, showing that he's not really that bad a guy, which makes it all the more annoying that he still works for Eggman. I like Eggman's snark there. He definitely has the best lines in this game, but it's called Badnik. Who calls them BattleBots? Tails had said that Orbot and Cubot were such a reflection of Eggman's stupidity, but didn't recognize the irony when he did something stupid himself. I get him wanting to give him a body again, to be nice, but why give him a body that's completely useless to him? What's he supposed to do with those giant hands that's productive? It's good that Sonic said genocide, reminding us that Eggman is indeed evil. But when Eggman says he's complicated, I don't take it seriously at all. No, you're not. You're a one-dimensional cliche. Like, there's only one way he's not. It doesn't even make any sense that he did save Tails. He could explain that he saved him for being a genius, but he should know that all he's ever going to use his genius for is fighting him. If he could turn Tails to his side, which he could only do with technology, then it would make sense that he saved him if he did it specifically because he was planning to do that to him. And killing him would just be a waste at that point. I like that Sonic shows a parental protective side by scolding Tails for almost getting himself killed. And it's good that it wasn't too scared to use the word killed. And Tails actually looks sympathetic here. After this, we have another pointless scene with the Zeti. Why the hell are there so many cutscenes devoted to these one-dimensional characters who are only there to be boss fights? This scene has Zavok and the old man decide to try to make Sonic a robot. It's bringing the roboticization concept into the games. I always thought it was a dark concept, straight out of a science fiction horror movie. But to be fair, I can only think of one other franchise doing something like this. It just seems unfitting in a game that's severely focused on badniks. This does add a sense of tension to the story, but it's obvious fake tension because we know they won't succeed. They could have had him get roboticized really temporarily. It happened to him in Archie. The way roboticization was in Sonic Lost World worked perfectly, so there's no reason Eggman would not do that in IDW. The next cutscene has Tails get kidnapped. Sonic says sadly that he was too slow to save his buddy, ignoring that it was him reacting quickly that got him in that situation. And Eggman doesn't lampshade this. Instead, he comforts him. This is so stupid. Eggman doesn't do this. He has no reason to do this. If Tails was as awesome as he built himself up to be, he would have pulled a gadget out of his shoe and broke out of it himself. If Sonic had been the one captured, then we would have gotten an excuse to play as Tails. We get introduced to the emo character. The annoying thing is Sonic doesn't just punch him in the face, since it's right up to him, and almost does it to threaten him. That's the biggest hole in these cutscenes where the Zeti introduce themselves to Sonic. Why the hell doesn't Sonic just attack them? He has no problem fighting them in the boss fights, so he's not morally opposed to it. And they keep bantering with him in the boss fights. So it's not that they're talking to him and he's too polite to interrupt them. He interrupted Shadow and Nessie too. Sonic is supposed to be impatient. I absolutely loathe how Tails is in this cutscene. When he comes out of the animal capsule, he's not scared at all. He's just looking uncharacteristically angry with the "draw me like one of your French girls" pose. It looks very jarring and creepy because he never stops doing it, and his eyes are half closed. This would make more sense for Amy. Why the hell doesn't he just get up and run away or attack them? He doesn't look like he's restrained. Why isn't he scared? This isn't Tails. I don't even want to look at this. If they want to make him look sassy, it just makes me wonder why he isn't fighting them. At least I giggled at how the emo runs in saying they don't have Sonic and all the Deadly Six say we know. That's pretty relatable. The next cutscene is the emo resentfully look at Sonic from above, wasting your time. I like that Orbot would rather work for Sonic.
Can I be your sidekick?
And Eggman deserves to have to hear that. So I guess the only reason he's still working for Eggman is it's the only place available to him. The only reason he's working for Eggman is every other role is filled. I really like that Orbot admires him for the right reasons. He should have said friend instead of sidekick. Saying he'd replace Tails was a recipe for disaster. Zamek tries to intimidate Sonic, and Sonic takes it seriously, which is good. Did Sonic really need to say, "That's horrible"? That's mood whiplash. Cubot says being a robot isn't so bad. It's too bad that's all he's allowed to say, because he could have provided some nice insight. Instead of Orbot mentioning the downsides, he just complains about his head being on his body. This is a problem only a robot could have, but it's also a very rare problem, so it doesn't get the point across, because it's never going to happen to Tails. Sega clearly doesn't know what tone to go for with this game. I thought Forces would star the transition out of the comedy era, but really this is where it started. Now for a very dramatic scene where Amy says to Sonic that she doesn't know how much longer she'll be able to live. And we're actually supposed to believe she never told Sonic she loved him before this. How are we supposed to take this seriously when she made it blatantly obvious she loved him the entire franchise? Then she loses contact with Sonic for good. What was it like for them after they were sucked up by the life-draining machine? I don't think it was like anything, I think they just were unconscious. I'm guessing the Grim Reaper was perfectly fine with Sonic resurrecting everyone who died to that machine. It's good to have this cutscene, because otherwise there'd be no focus on the threat the Zeddy pose. And it's against someone you're supposed to care about, not some random city. This cutscene is really stupid. The Zeddy strap Tails to Roboticizer and just leave for no reason. So of course Tails is able to reprogram it. If they only do this to him out of sadism, why wouldn't they watch it? Why did Zomom leave his sandwich there, with a toothpick for Tails to use it? Of course everyone can get full sometimes, but Zomom doesn't give you the impression that he gets full. He's eating almost every time you see him, so he's gonna get full inevitably, but he still wouldn't leave his sandwich behind for Tails to eat it. And why is there a toothpick in a sandwich anyways? Tails manipulates his tail fur-like fingers to somehow reprogram the machine with a toothpick. He hits green keys on the keyboard with it, when he can't even see what he's doing. So how is he supposed to even know what they do? Why is there a mechanism into the Roboticizer that just dressed Tails up as a cyborg that could be accessed by pressing the right buttons? You'd have to program that mechanism into it intentionally, so Tails must have done it. Roboticizer by definition turns organic into inorganic. So the only way to get around that is to have it roboticize only the air around his body. He should have explained that. Why didn't they restrain his tails too? After the Deadly Six throw boulders at Sonic and Eggman, Eggman then seemingly sacrificed himself to save Sonic, which only makes sense if you think that he thought he was gonna survive, and he only saved Sonic so he could fight the Zeddy for him. But of course he'll be revealed to be alive later. This is one of the only pieces of evidence for valuing Eggman's life. In the classic games, he's very careless with his life. There's a dramatic scene where Sonic still is out of contact with Amy and Knuckles, and stares into space for a moment sadly. This is one of the only times I ever felt sympathy for Roger Sonic. Right after this, is a cutscene where Sonic's exasperated with the Zeti. I guess he thinks he has to keep up the act to avoid looking vulnerable. This is the scene where Tails shows up roboticized. I hate seeing his creepy stare before he awesomely says never and shoots them. Sadly, he doesn't accurately hit them, for literally no reason. How does he change his eye without it being permanent? It looks like he has a cyborg eye, which could have come in handy despite looking awful. He'd only fake roboticization by having it so that the air around him is roboticized. If he can have it on, then why can't he put it back on and use it again? Why doesn't he use the laser shooter ever again? Why didn't Sonic bring Tails with him to take advantage of his Mega Buster? Why wasn't Tails playable like this? He was playable in Sonic Boom, he was playable in the DLC in Frontiers. Eggman shows up in a giant mech to be the final boss for no reason. Sonic has a really lame and awkward comeback, which even FDA doesn't like. Tails returns life to the planet, which has to be what brings Amy and Knuckles back to life. Eggman insists the Zeti will be his once again. This was clearly written because they overestimated the popularity of the Zeti. Eggman tries to jetpack away, but thanks to Sonic, he falls off the Lost Hex because Sonic stole the exhaust pose. How did Eggman live through that? It's smart of Sonic. So this is living by his own feelings by impulsively spiting him because of his anger. But it's ignoring his past feelings. He really does live in the present. I guess the reason he didn't try to kill him in Sonic 1 is that he didn't think he would be able to handle it. And now he knows better. What a great way to end this story, by Sonic sleeping. That's exactly what this game makes you do. This is a painful story to go through. Whether the story is charming entirely depends on how funny you think the comedy is. And if you don't laugh at the comedy, you're only going to focus on how obviously out of place it is for the Sonic games, and see how lame it really is. So most of the story is lame, and it's not memorable in a good way even without that, because whenever I think about the story, one of the only things I think of is that everyone's standing around in a field. At least it looks Sonic-like. It's not realistic looking grass, which would immediately repel me. Tails throws a bitch fit with no real consequences. He's in general a completely insufferable brat that never gets called out on it as if he's a Gary Stu creator's pet the whole game. The Deadly Six are one-dimensional and spend too much time on screen, and the story has no sense of proper flow and foreshadowing to it. It's written like a TV show. A lot of stuff is never explained about the Deadly Six, like why they became the Deadly Six, why they were sealed away, why are they the only Zeti, and their ultimate fate. It makes sense for Sonic to make a mistake like kicking away the conch. How does he deal with the mistake? He insults Eggman, he trivializes his friends' worries by one-upping them. And Sonic never can prove that he learns his lesson, because when Tails gets captured, he blames it on him not reacting quick enough. Usually Tails is supposed to be the mediator when two enemies working together are fighting. To have him be one of the ones fighting is a betrayal of his character. It's about as wrong as Cream being this way. At the very least, the story does do a few things right. It has tension and threatening lines from the villains. It makes you feel sorry for Sonic at one point. And portrays Sonic as a flawed character because of a canon personality trait he has. It has Tails be upset at one point. And they try for a darker tone, but they don't try hard enough. I'd still prefer Heroes' story over this. It had really short cutscenes. They knew how bare bones the plot was, so they had the amount of story content match it. Most of the cutscenes in this game only exist to have a joke in it. The light draining machine is only there to give tension. I like that it goes against nature. That's a Satyam Robotnik thing. Is Eggman going back to his roots? Aside from Tails' Deus Ex Machina rescuing himself instead of Sonic saving him, at least the story makes sense. Aside from the fact that the Lost Hex even exists, but at least the fact that it says Hex in its title makes it easy to figure out it's a hex, so a witch made it. That immediately makes me wonder, why did a witch make it? So now I have to assume they made it to have a place to exile the Zeti. So it has to be a little planet situation, where it constantly goes back and forth between one planet and another with teleportation. It makes sense in a world with magic in it. But they still should have explained it, because without it, it just feels like it only happens for the sake of having a plot.